to support it on the condition that Hyperion and the state of South Dakota comply with the state's environmental impact statement statute. When this was first getting off the ground, I wrote a letter to Secretary Steve Perner in the Rounds-Dugard administration, and I said to him, let's make use of the statute we've adopted in this state to ensure the integrity of our environment. Instead, this administration did not make use of the environmental impact statement statute in South Dakota. They have neglected to do that, so to sit here and say that we know for sure that it's going to be a green refinery, that it's going to be safe for the environment is something none of us can say. Step one should be comply with the environmental impact statement under the state law of South Dakota, and then let's review the project.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Dugard, the rebuttal.
Well, I'm aware of that letter that you sent because I've seen that letter, and what that letter encourages the state to do is involve the Environmental Protection Agency in an environmental impact statement. And I would ask the farmers in this room if they trust the Environmental Protection Agency and want them to make decisions that impact South Dakota. The Environmental Protection Agency has done nothing but flex its muscles and try to exert control over agriculture, whether it's in duplicative regulation of pesticides and herbicides, or increased controls over dust, or trying to eliminate the word navigable over navigable waters so that they control every mud puddle in South Dakota. They've tried to regulate carbon dioxide and even methane gas from livestock. Tell me that we want the Environmental Protection Agency in South Dakota's business deciding what sort of development we want to have. Now don't get me wrong, I want our environment protected. I love South Dakota, but I don't trust the Environmental Protection Agency to do the job.
Okay, folks, thanks, Mr. Heidepper.
The Lieutenant Governor doesn't trust the Environmental Protection Agency, but he sure must trust state government, because under his watch, the size of the Department of Agriculture's state employees has gone from 170 to 233. Now, does everybody feel good about the fact that the bureaucracy involving the State Department of Agriculture is swollen by 33% under the watch of this administration? I don't think any of us do. I don't think you need them telling you how to farm and ranch. And I really can't understand why we've had such a dramatic increase in the size of the agriculture bureaucracy in the state of South Dakota.
Quickly. I want to respond to that. First of all, the numbers that Senator Heidepper uses to describe the growth of FTE or employee equivalents are exaggerated. Secondly, 65% of those new employees in the last 8 years are teachers, researchers, and your own students, your children, your grandchildren at South Dakota State, at USD, and other state institutions who are working under grants. When grant money comes to South Dakota, it flows through our institutions, and the teachers and researchers and students who are hired by those grant dollars go on the state's payroll system. That doesn't mean your tax dollars are paying for them. 74% of the dollars paying for those positions are not state tax dollars. And the Department of Ag is a good example. A number of those employees are the Black Hat Fire Crew in the Black Hills National Forest. They are 100% federal employees. They're stationed in the Black Hills. They're paid for with federal dollars that flow through the state budget. But it's all federal money, and those are the people that are there to fight fires in South Dakota or elsewhere, paid for with federal dollars.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on. Another question here from the audience. And again, if you have questions, you can hand them in. We'll start this round with Mr. Dugard. What will you do as governor when it comes to ethanol in South Dakota?
Well, ethanol has been a boon to corn farmers in South Dakota, no question about it. When Governor Rounds and I took office, there were ethanol plants producing 233 million gallons of ethanol. Today, those plants and more since then have been added to create 14 plants that are operating now and generating over 1 billion gallons of ethanol. That's a great growth. It's been good for our corn farmers. There's been some bumps along the way in terms of prices, and there's been some bumps along the way in terms of volatility that have hurt some of the ethanol plants. Right now, The margins that the ethanol plants are seeing are very thin, and it's a consequence of our bumping up against the E10 ceiling. We need to encourage the EPA and the federal government to get off the dime on E10 and E15. They promised they would make the E15 decision by December of last year, and then they said, no, we're going to wait until June, and then they didn't make it then, and they still haven't made it. The problem with price in the basis widening that you're seeing between the price we're getting and the board price is all a consequence of the supply of ethanol is now reaching the demand at E10. And so we need to get the federal government off the dime on E15. That in the very near term is vital to ethanol interests. And as governor, I will be on the bully pulpit arguing to protect South Dakota's interests in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dugard. Mr. Heidemann, ethanol, as governor, what would you do?
Thank you, Jerry. I see my friend Mitch Fargen from the House of Representatives over here. Mitch and I co-sponsored a number of bills in the legislative session to really drive demand, whether it's blender pumps, which are so important to the future of ethanol, or using ethanol in state vehicles. We continue to buy unleaded gasoline by huge quantities. Why? When we have ethanol available, that's what we should be putting in state vehicles. But I have to tell you, I find it interesting to hear the Lieutenant Governor talk like he's a supporter of ethanol. You all remember the 2008 session when the Rounds-Dugard administration attempted to increase the tax by eliminating the tax incentive for ethanol. They came before the Senate committee and said, we want to increase the tax, and the Senate committee said no. You know what they did? They did it anyway. Through the Department of Taxation, they decided to increase the tax on ethanol until we called them out on it. I had a press conference, a number of others did too, to stop the Rounds-Dugard administration from increasing the tax on ethanol. That sends exactly the wrong signal, especially for a state that's looking at 200 bushel corn, a production of up to 1 billion bushels in the state of South Dakota. That corn's got to go somewhere. We need to drive the ethanol market.
Quick comment, Mr. Dugard.
Well, one thing I agree about is blender pumps are definitely an important part of our solution. Blender pumps at the state level would do very little to help drive ethanol demand. Right now, if we want to put in blending or additional fuel tanks and additional fueling pumps at our state-run facilities, our DOT facilities, that's going to impact less than 1% of the fuel market. That's not worth it. We should plan that money, if we have it. It's going to cost over $2 million, and I don't know where that's coming from, Senator. But if we were going to spend that money should be spent on blender pumps at retail stores so that the whole state can make use of blender pumps. But in the near term, again, E15 is where we need to put our emphasis. The other thing Senator Heiprim forgets is that my name is Dennis Dugard. My name is Dennis Dugard. My name is not Mike Rounds. So to assume that I would simply do everything that Mike Rounds has done is a misunderstanding of my nature. I'm my own man. I don't disagree with what the governor does in public because I think that's my duty as his lieutenant governor. It doesn't mean I would make the same decisions. When I was in the legislature, I was given the Friend of Ethanol Award. Ask the lobbyists for the ethanol industry if I was their supporter in those years when I was in the legislature and I had a vote. I don't have a vote unless there's a tie. But I remind you, I'm my own man and I'll make my own decisions, and those decisions will be to support ethanol.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear the Lieutenant Governor talk about how he is his own man when in fact he embraces the Rounds-Dugard administration when it's convenient and he runs from it when it's not. The fact is that state government has grown in an undisciplined way. At the same time, all the other states around us have reduced the number of employees and our population has not grown. But our workforce has swollen. That's the problem South Dakota's facing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks. We're going to move on and talk about transportation, and we have a question about the view on raising license plate fees for county use. That's been one issue, and let's talk about that in the relationship to the transportation issue. A number of legislators have told me they believe that could be one